Hello again, and this is the podcast Paranormal Family Therapy, and I am the host, Dr. Darren Wallace. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, a licensed clinical social worker, and a certified addictions counselor. And I've been working with families since 1996, and I've been working with families dealing with paranormal phenomena in family therapy since 2002, so about 20 years. So Paranormal Family Therapy is a podcast that talks about paranormal phenomena and how the psychotherapeutic community interacts with the paranormal, with family therapy in particular. So, our guest today is Bob Kelso, who is a former licensed clinical social worker and was a longtime AAMFT approved supervisor. And what an approved supervisor is someone who is qualified to supervise marriage and family therapists. Bob is a longtime mentor of mine, along with my other mentor, David Blair. Both he and Bob started Denver Family Therapy Center in 1988. Bob was also one of the founding members of Denver Family Institute, which is founded in 1982, which is a 2-year postgraduate training institute on marriage and family therapy. So Bob has been working with families since 1974. He is recently retired, but was good enough to come onto the podcast today to staff haunted house cases with me again. It's been years since we've done this, but this is a former case of mine that I had done years ago. So welcome, Bob, and I appreciate you taking the time out of retirement to do the podcast today.
Thank you, Darren. I appreciate the very nice, kind words of introduction. And this is kind of an exciting thing. I haven't been doing supervision for a while, so I'm kind of charged about doing this today.
Yeah, so just so everyone knows, Bob is a huge advocate for supervision and family therapy and has been doing so for decades. So, yeah, we're pretty lucky to have him on. Okay, so Bob, now you like a regular supervision case, I send over to you some brief information. Of course, we'll look at it and allow the audience to also be able to look at what it is that we are showing here. And this will hopefully help some people be able to see, what it looks like to staff cases in family therapy, or at least how you do it.
Okay.
And, what we look at and what we think about and how we process, some of the information that we have that is being presented to us by the families, and then what do we do with that information?
Okay. Sounds good, Darren. I'm going to use what I call a case staffing format. It's something I've developed probably 35, 40 years of doing supervision. And so I'm going to run Darren through this and ask him a lot of questions, and then we'll finish up by talking a little bit about what was helpful and not helpful for me to get a little feedback from Darren. So the first question, Darren, is what do you want from supervision today? How will you know that this has been helpful?
Well, what I want to be able to do with you today, Bob, is I want to be able to look at the case, look at the information. Now, this is a haunted house case, so they do have a black mist that keeps showing up, especially in front of the 8-year-old Tim, and how to continue to work with the family from a family systems perspective, but also take into account this really unusual phenomena that's happening, which is this black mist,
Gotcha.
and how to help get the family to work together, to come together on things, because there are several problems taking place, one of which is the black mist that keeps showing up. And so the idea is how to basically unite the family.
Gotcha. Second question is, actually, there's two. Can you just briefly go over your genogram, like who's involved in the case, including black mist, and also just a pertinent background, just anything like that real quick?
Sure. Okay, so what we have, so here's the genogram of the family. It's a basic one. This was done, a long time ago, and so I couldn't quite remember all of the relationships that were also part of the original genogram, but this is what I could remember.
me just review what I have down here. I'm looking at Jack and Sarah. There was conflict. There's some disagreement going on there. Is that correct?
Yeah. So what I would say is some of the original conflict was actually between the parents. I mean, that has been ongoing. Now,
Okay.
some of that has now drifted into a conflict between Tim and Jack. And so it's that classic triangle where
Right. Right.
the original conflict between the parents then becomes a conflict between, or the child starts to have sort of the symptoms of the family, and then takes the pressure off of the original conflict, which is between the parents. The parents tend to get along when dealing with Tim.
Okay. And then Sarah and Tim are joined together against Jack?
Yes, they have that cross-generational coalition going.
Right. Right.
Where it's the parent is siding with a child against the other parent. Yeah.
And Becky and Sarah are joined together. Is that right?
Yeah, they also get along well. And I didn't. People can see it on the screen at least. Is that they do? Becky and Tim tend to get along pretty well, although I didn't indicate it right here. They get along okay, and for a 14-year-old teenager and an 8-year-old kid brother, they get along.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're pretty good.
Now, a question about Black Mist. Not knowing a lot about paranormal, what can you describe that? Is that like black rain, or is that something else? What is that?
The way it's been described to me is it's a black mist, and it comes up mainly at night in Tim's room, and of all places, out of his closet.
Okay.
So he'll shut the door to his closet, and he'll still like hang out around there when he's to bed, and then he sees it, and then he gets scared, runs out of the room, tells his parents. They come in there, and there's nothing in there by that time. Jack gets upset because Tim keeps waking him up at night because of this, and now Tim gets in trouble talking about it and waking his parents up. Jack doesn't want to have that happen anymore. Now Sarah, on the other hand, has also seen this, and so has Becky.
Right. Okay.
But, Jack has not seen the mist. So
Jack has not.
Jack has not, but just so that everyone knows, at the point when I started staffing this case, Jack had not yet seen the mist.
Okay.
Now, eventually he does.
Okay, gotcha.
But at this point, no, he did not.
Okay. And let's see. Sarah and Tim and Becky have a conflictual relationship with Black Mist. They don't like Black Mist. Is that correct?
That's correct, which we can we'll talk about that when I pull up the triangles. Yeah, we can look at that. So just a quick thing on the genogram. So there is that conflict between Sarah and Jack basically with all the family members, and then they all get along with each other. Okay, so there's a clear repeated triangle that takes place there. Sarah has some conflict with Jack's mom. I'm not sure how much that plays itself out in this situation. Okay. Their finances, they're doing okay. There's some conflict between Jack and Sarah on that on occasion. They are a Christian family, socioeconomic status, they're middle class. Jack's family, 2 years plus in the United States, German and English descent. Sarah's ethnic background is Scottish and French. Okay. Two plus generations in the U.S. Jack is heterosexual. Sarah's heterosexual, and their gender identification: Jack is male, Sarah is female. Okay. Becky is female, and Tim is male. Yeah.
And you have a good relationship with Jack and Sarah?
I do. Yeah. So that again, I think we should now pull up the triangle. So what we have here is here's Jack, here's Tim, here's myself, Sarah, Becky, and the Black Mist. And so these
Okay.
when there's a cross between, in this relationship, that means there's some kind of conflict going on, just so everyone knows.
Right.
So there's two relationships in this triangle that are of importance, at least I believe that we should focus on. Well, there's my relationship with Jack, which is good. It's positive. And I have a good relationship with Tim. I have a good relationship with Becky, and I have a good relationship with Sarah. So part of what I've been working at is to make sure I maintain that good relationship with all the family members, especially since Jack is in conflict with basically all the family members.
Right. Now, on that point, just a quick question. When you join, do you feel like pulled or in a position about Black Mist? In other words, like, does Sarah say, "Hey, Darren, do you think Black Mist is real? Is this BS or what?" And I mean, do you feel any pulls from anybody on that?
The Tim especially, but Sarah and at some extent Becky are all pulling for me to have conflict with the Mist, as they all fear it and don't want it around, and that's one of their goals is to get it out. Jack, on the other, and this is and if people can watch the screen, that's this relationship. He's not in conflict with it because he's simply not acknowledging it.
Okay.
He's saying, at least at this time, that it doesn't exist. It's all hogwash, and so one of the things that I have to be careful of is because if you look at this, like I'm in conflict with the Mist, right? And so that's this one here between myself and the Mist.
Yeah.
But I need to still maintain this relationship, which is positive and good, with Jack.
Absolutely.
And so that could put Jack in this triangle. I'm in conflict with the Mist, but he and I get along, and he doesn't really have an opinion on this Mist. So that actually can put some pressure on him to be in conflict with the Mist.
Yeah. Okay.
That's kind of how that triangle theory works, right? Yeah.
All right, just real quick. Who's most bothered by Black Mist in the family? Who is the biggest problem?
Tim, because it's happening with him by far the most.
Gotcha.
Others have seen it at times, but Tim sees it on a regular basis.
Okay.
There for a while, it was basically every single night.
Okay. Let me look here. Triangle circumflex. You want to talk about that for a minute, Darren?
Sure. So what we have here is the circumflex, and so beginning state with the family is where they're at right now at this point with the case is that they are rigidly disengaged.
Okay.
And the goal is to become structurally connected, so as to get here, right? And so in doing so, then we have to increase some of the flexibility and their adaptability to change. We also need to increase their connection with one another.
Can you talk about the presenting problem? Like, what does Jack say the presenting problem is, and Sarah and Tim and Becky?
Yeah, so here are the presenting problems from basically from each person's perspective in the family. So for Jack, he believes that there might be something happening in the house. He's not quite for sure. He's not locked into that idea.
Gotcha.
But he believes the real problem is his son isn't following rules. He's making excuses why he's not doing his homework, why he's not doing his chores, because he's scared, because he's anxious. And that's what Jack sees as the problem. Sarah believes that there's too much anger, too much frustration. There's a lot of fear in the house. And so she believes that growing tension between Jack and Tim, her husband and their son, will get worse So she's resentful that Jack does not believe that Tim,
Right.
or that Jack is not believing that Tim is having these experiences.
Right.
She's really upset because she's actually seen it, and Jack still isn't saying, well,
Gotcha.
it must be real. Becky has also had those experiences. Tim is the person that they came in, was sort of identified as the identified client. So that's this black mist. He says the problems of the black mist keeps appearing in front of him in his room primarily, although it has appeared in other parts of the house as well. He's upset that when this appears, then he goes to his parents, namely his father, that is, he's then punished for going to them. So this becomes then a trust issue for him.
Right.
A sense of betrayal that his parents aren't really there to help him.
Right. Not listening to him.
Yeah, not listening to him, his dad in particular. He does
Right.
trust his mom, but not his dad. And so
Right.
there's growing tension between the two of them. Becky it has appeared in front of her as well. It frightens her. She doesn't like to be around. She spends a lot of time outside of the house with friends and doing other things.
Yeah. In your write-up, it said that this mistrust has taken over the family. How long has that gone on for? Do you have any sense?
Probably the last 3 months or so, prior to them coming in.
Okay.
And so it's grown now. The original, like I said, it seems like the original problem was actually between the parents, between Jack and Sarah. Basically, the same kinds of things where Jack would have this idea that Sarah's too lenient with the children, and
Right.
Sarah thinks that Jack is too hard on the children.
Right. Right. Classic. Kind of
Yeah.
classic.
Okay. Yeah, classic conflict between the parents. Yeah.
And treatment goal, what do they want from you in therapy?
Yeah, so the primary goal is for everyone to be able to get along with each other, right? That's their ultimate goal that all of them can agree on. So each family member would, in order to follow through on this goal, each family member would be committed to working at showing respect for one another, especially during disagreements, and allowing each family member to have a part in conversations and be listened to,
Right.
which all of them can agree to. Now, that to me was the one that helped bring all of their goals together, is that it allows me as the therapist to be able to get them to talk about things that in other instances there was some boundary where it was not allowed. And so by listening carefully to what Jack has to say, the father, about what he wants and what he needs to have happen in the house, then that also allows Tim to be able to talk about what he wants to talk about, and others will, especially Jack, will listen to it and be able to connect with it. Right.
Okay. What I was thinking of is that they want to be able to function better as a family, and they want black mist out of their life. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Number 7, what's your systemic hypothesis on the case?
Well, yeah, I have it right down here. So the presence of the miss has just amplified what's already there, right? The conflict that was already there, this has made it worse. And part of what might be happening is it's getting even worse. And as it gets worse, this thing gets even stronger. But there's that secret sort of conflict between the mom and the dad that's playing itself out in Jack's relationship with Tim. Right. So it's just the problem just moved from the parents to Jack. Yeah. Jack has this sense of powerlessness about this. This is at the crux of this. Right? He can't do anything about the mist. He doesn't believe he can do anything with this. And so he believes what he can do and that he needs to do something. So he's going to do something with Tim in order to get Tim to comply and follow rules and do what he needs to do. And so that's where it moved. It moved from talking about the mist to getting Tim doing what he needs to do, and Jack making sure that as his father, he's making sure that his son is doing what he needs to do.
Right. And so in your write-up, it talked several times, it brought up this notion that they felt disconnected from each other. Is that your kind of observation too?
Well, I think overall they're disconnected as it plays itself out when they're all together. Now, they're dyads, they actually get along pretty well between
Right.
Sarah and Tim, and Sarah and Becky do okay. Becky and Tim, they do okay. It's when you get all four of them together as a whole that then
Right.
they're disengaged and hard for them to talk and share and have a good time and be together. And so that's that goal that they do have, along that circumplex model, is to be more connected and to also loosen things up, so it's not just the same thing over and over again.
Right.
They're actually practicing and doing things together that they haven't been in order to help them be more connected, but then also, be more free to do the things that they need to do as a family.
Would Sarah say she wants Jack to be more connected to her and the kids?
Yes, absolutely. She wants her to.
Okay.
She wants Jack to be more connected. All family members want to be more connected with each other, right, and want others to be more connected.
But Sarah would say, Jack, you need to be more of a dad to Tim. You need to be more of a husband to me. You need to be more involved with Becky.
Correct. Yeah.
Given that, what would be your systemic focus of treatment? What would you want different, I guess, is maybe the question there, Darren. What would need to be different in the map?
Well, the way that I've at least initially approached this is from a structural family therapy perspective, which is to establish the parents as on top of the hierarchy, and also having a clear boundary between the two of them so that they are clearly in charge and on the same team, but then are also simultaneous to that very open to what Tim has to say, that he knows what he has to say means something to both of them, not just Sarah.
Gotcha.
And that they would take, what he's experiencing seriously, but that he would clearly be below them, because what's happened is because of that cross-generational coalition there, it's also messed up the hierarchy, where then all of a sudden, children are having more power than they normally would, because they're aligning with their mom against their dad. And so they're sort of elevated up in that hierarchy to a level that really they don't need to be, especially an 8-year-old doesn't need to be up that high.
So kind of that classic Jay Haley strategic model around putting the parents in charge and the boundary between parents and the children, and getting the parents to work together as a team to come up with a plan to make things better with Tim or Black Mist. Is that kind of the idea there?
Yeah, is to align them all together. So it'd be that structural thing, that Mnuchin would talk about, where you get the parents especially to be a united front, but then get the entire family on board, where the mist is actually the thing that they need to be in conflict with, and not necessarily each other. So doing what they can in order to be connected to one another, and do whatever they need to do with this mist. And that's where the medium and possibly some other folks that might be involved would come in, is to sort of verify that this thing is around, and then perhaps even figure out what it is,
and not only, Darren, to get Jack and Sarah to work together as a parental team regarding Tim, but also Black Mist. What's the plan to respond to Black Mist?
Yeah, as a team. Yeah, what do we need to do? And if there's infighting with the team, then it makes it more difficult to do that. Yeah. So the idea is how to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. Black Mist is kind of like another child in the family.
Yeah. I suppose you could frame it that way. It's the way I would frame it would be is that the Black Mist is sort of like an invading force. that needs
Gotcha.
to be treated as something that shouldn't be as powerful as it is, because it's
Right.
basically coming into the family and disrupting it.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so the question would be in your setup with empowering Sarah and Jack to be in charge of Tim, would say, to be in charge of Black Mist, this invading force.
Yeah.
How are you going to handle this child who is an invading force in your life? How are you going to respond to them? Work together as a team to respond to them.
Yeah. What can you do with each other to be a better team? What
Right.
can you do with each other to let this thing know that it doesn't have any power with you and it needs to leave, because it's not a positive one. Now, one thing that I have not yet said is the power that this thing has. It's not just an invading force, but there's sort of a presence about it that
Right.
powerful and influences other. They each talk about, except for Jack, they each talk about dread in the house, sadness, anger, some negative emotions in the house,
Oh,
not
yeah.
just with each other, but when this, since this thing started becoming more and more influential. And
Yeah.
so, they talk about when it's around, it sort of has a presence about it that's not good. It's negative.
It's just a quick comment about that. When I read through your notes this morning, I kind of felt myself getting caught in the content of this, of Black Mist myself, kind of like, oh my God, this Black Mist, that's permeating, that's invading this house. And so it kind of, several times I had to stop myself and say, well, wait a minute here, hold on. This is content. I need to move to a process systemic level here and view this case from interactional perspective versus just content, because it's so what's the word, seductive, or so kind of like, oh my good, you get caught up in this thing about Black Mist and ghosts and the paranormal and all that. And I found myself this morning reading your stuff and kind of getting caught in that and thinking, wait a minute here, this is just another case, this is content. So interesting. Real interesting. Okay, so have you gotten Mom and Dad together yet, Jack and Sarah, about how to deal with Tim and Black Mist yet?
Yeah. So some of the work that I've done is to try to unite the parents, and so
Right.
that's some of the beginning work, and they were all for it too. It's like, okay, how can the two of you get away? And have some parent time where our spouse time, where it's just the two of you. You're not being parents, you're not worried about these things, so you enjoy yourself.
Awesome.
And then some beginning work on between Tim and Jack, just some father-son time away from the house, not talking about ghost stuff, not talking about chores, not talking about homework.
Yeah.
Just connecting with one another separate from all of this, so that
Awesome.
those relationships are being strengthened. But what it does come back to is they have that opportunity to connect with one another, but then they get locked into
Yeah.
It still comes down to this mist, and what are we going to do about it?
When you put Sarah and Jack in charge of Tim and Black Mist, what's been their response to that? Have they like, oh, okay, this sounds good, Darren, we'll do it, or this is BS and I don't want to do it, or what's been their response to that?
Yeah, so they're not quite united, because Sarah would like Jack to acknowledge that the Black Mist exists, and so up to this point, where we would be staffing this case, Jack had not seen the mist yet, and so there's still there. It's being worked at.
Gotcha. Okay.
So they're working towards collaborating with the ultimate goal of being able to do this. At least that's the idea, and they haven't quite built up to that yet.
Okay.
But they're working towards it.
As they do that, has there been any reaction from Tim or Black Mist as the parents, as you attempt to get Sarah and Jack to work as a parental team? Has there been any reaction from Tim or Black Mist?
No, not yet. But I mean, it's a good setup for Tim to be able to see them doing this, and then of course join him on it, so that basically all four of them would be able to do it.
Okay. Any other questions you had?
Well,
You have about the case?
Well, no, I'm practicing the structural thing by establishing the hierarchy and the boundaries between the family members to try to open them up, clear boundaries, so they're as connected as they can, so that whenever we do introduce this medium that's eventually going to be part of what we do with the case, that they're a united front and are ready to follow through on whatever they need to do in order to get it out. So it's setting that up and establishing that. I'm also using some aspects of brief strategic family therapy. So how can when each one is talking to one another, how can they talk to one another so that it's geared towards listening carefully and caring about what each other has to say, versus jumping to conclusions and arguing about points that may not actually serve any kind of function, but that they can actually listen carefully to one another. And a little bit of Gottman stuff in there around making sure that if they get locked into some kind of gridlock conversation, they get themselves out of that interaction.
Absolutely. Yeah. And continue to compliment them on the good steps that they're taking around listening and being respectful and including and each other and all that. So two last questions. Given what we've talked about this morning on this case, what's your plan going forward?
My plan is to continue to make sure that I maintain in sessions a very clear, positive relationship with each family member, but especially with Jack, so that I don't become in conflict with him and then end up repeating all those other triangles where he's the bad guy, and then help work at that other relationship between Jack and the Mist. Eventually, for him to acknowledge this would be helpful, but not completely necessary, but helpful. It would be helpful if he were in conflict with the Black Mist and acknowledge it, take a stance. And so some of the buildup that I'm working towards, and this is strategic family therapy, is to be able to help him take a position against the Black Mist eventually, so that the others can see that. Because the belief that I have is that if he takes that position against the Black Mist, as the rest of them have, then it will make it easier for Jack's relationship with his daughter, with his son, and with his
absolutely
wife to actually be healed. Now, in order for me to help facilitate some of that, I have to maintain my good relationship with Jack in order to help perpetuate some of that.
Oh yeah, it sounds like, Darren, that's the MRI concept of neutrality, trying to walk that, keep a delicate step, a delicate balance there, where you're yin-ing and you're yang-ing, and you're trying to kind of stay on that tightrope, and not kind of overplaying it, go one side or the other. And especially if you take a position around saying to Jack, hey, what about this myth? And let's talk about it, maybe challenge it, maybe deconstruct it a little bit, whatever. So, okay. So here's the last question that I always end supervision with. What was helpful today in supervision, and what was not helpful? And that's good feedback for me, the supervisor.
Oh, I think what was helpful is just going through this and thinking more about, how to unite the family. That's always a good thing to think through. and that really needs to be the purpose of what we're doing, because we can't follow on the goals without uniting the family. If they're still split up, it's going to be very difficult, and each one of them needing to do their part, and how can I help them play their parts with each other so that they can strengthen that and do it. As far as what can be improved on our supervision, I suppose the only downside that I can think of with this is that I already know what the end of this looks like.
Right,
I
right.
know
No, I
how it
understand.
turned
Yeah.
out. So I was the difficult part, at least for me, was trying to put my head back into like session 3 or 4 when I actually know by session 12 or 13 how it turned out.
Right, right.
And so that part I guess was difficult, but it was good to think this through again. And it just, this reinforces this idea, and the work that we do is that there's a process of helping the family, ghost or not,
Right,
working on their relationships,
right.
doing certain things so that their relationship gets stronger and better, that then they can use as a sort of a weapon with the entity, especially if they need to kick it out. But it's just good for them anyway,
Yeah,
regardless if there was a ghost or something in the house,
right.
that this actually
Absolutely.
helps them be closer together. Yeah.
Okay, one last question, I promise. Any question that I asked that was particularly striking to you, that got your attention?
Well, I don't think I've thought through as well as I have now the idea of what would Jack and Sarah be saying to the entity, that would help Tim to understand that they're on his side. I hadn't quite thought that one through
Okay,
at length, because that's not because I don't think I would have. It's just at this point I was thinking about just establishing their relationship and
sure, sure.
talk about it before their action of being united and telling this mist where to take itself and go.
Yeah. I,
That was helpful. Yeah.
last thing I promised, Darren, as a supervisor, I got to be careful I talk too much, but I had this vision of you having Sarah and Jack in a room and then having an empty chair with black mist sitting there, and then, having them a part of the session,
Yeah.
And,
Well, I think
Mom and
that's a
Dad,
good
how are you going to deal with this invading force in your family? Yeah. Anyhow, all right, Darren.
Well, thank you, Bob, for being with us here today. Bob Kelso, I appreciate your time and your stories.
Yep. Thank you, Darren.
Supervision.
Fun.
And thank you all for listening today. This has been Paranormal Family Therapy, and I am your host, Dr. Darren Wallace. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.